So let's talk about what's been happening inside of you, because something is shifting, something quiet, something deep. And I know you felt it, this awareness that's been growing, this sense that the separation you've been experiencing isn't as solid as it seemed. I'm not talking about physical distance. I'm talking about the space inside your own heart, the wall you built, the protection you needed, the boundary that felt so necessary, and maybe still is. But something about it is changing. Something about how you hold it is different now. You know what I'm noticing? You're softer, not weaker, softer. And there's a difference. You're not as rigid in your thinking about this person. You're not as locked into the story you've been telling yourself. There's a kind of opening, a willingness to see things differently, to feel things differently. And that's huge. That's growth. That's you becoming someone who doesn't need everything to be black and white, someone who can hold complexity, someone who can sit with not knowing and still be okay. Does this resonate with where you are right now? Let me know in the comments. Here's what I want you to understand. This shift you're feeling, it's not about them. Not really. It's about you. It's about what's happening in your own awareness, what's softening in your own heart, what's becoming possible inside of you that wasn't possible before. You've been carrying something, a kind of heaviness, a kind of tension, like you had to keep this person at a certain distance in your mind just to survive, just to keep moving forward, just to protect yourself from feeling too much. And that was necessary. I'm not saying it wasn't. You needed that protection. You needed that space. You needed to learn how to exist without them defining your entire emotional landscape. But now you're noticing something different. You're noticing that you can think about them without collapsing. You can feel about them without losing yourself. You can hold the memory, the connection, the history without it consuming you. And that's power, real power. The kind that doesn't come from shutting down or shutting out. The kind that comes from being present with what is. There's this thing that happens when you stop resisting, when you stop fighting against what you feel, when you stop trying to control the narrative. You start to notice there's less distance. Not because anything external has changed, but because you're not creating the distance anymore. You're not pushing, you're not pulling, you're just here, aware, present. And in that presence, things feel closer, things feel more possible, things feel less final. Have you noticed this, the sense that the separation isn't as absolute as it once felt? Let me know if this speaks to you. Now, I need to be really clear about something. I'm not here to tell you what's meant to be. I'm not here to promise you anything about what happens next. That's not what this is about. This is about what you're experiencing right now, in this moment. This awareness that's growing inside of you. This recognition that maybe, just maybe, the story isn't over. Not because of fate or destiny or anything outside of you, but because you're becoming someone who can hold a different possibility. You're becoming someone who doesn't need to be right, who doesn't need to prove a point, who doesn't need to punish or protect or perform. You're just being. And in that being, there's space, there's breath, there's room for things to be different than they were. And I think that's what you're feeling, this sense that the emotional distance, the inner wall, the separation you created for your own survival, it's thinning, it's softening, it's becoming less necessary. Not because you're weak, not because you're giving in, but because you're strong enough now to not need it. You're strong enough to feel without breaking, to remember without drowning, to hold space for complexity without losing your center. And that's everything. Here's what I want you to sit with. Right now, in this moment, you're not the same person you were when this distance began. You've grown, you've changed, you've evolved into someone who can hold more, feel more, be more. And when you change, everything changes. Not because the external world shifts to meet you, but because your internal world creates a different reality, a different experience, a different possibility. You're noticing things you didn't notice before. You're feeling things you couldn't feel before. You're open to things you weren't ready for before. And maybe, just maybe, that means the distance you've been holding isn't serving you anymore. Maybe it's time to let it soften. Let it breathe. Let it be less solid than it's been. Does this feel true for you? Let me know in the comments. I'm not saying rush toward anything. I'm not saying force anything. I'm not saying abandon your boundaries or your wisdom or your self-respect. Please hear me on that. I'm saying notice what's changing inside of you. Notice what feels different. Notice where you're softer, more open, more willing to see with new eyes. Because that awareness, that's where your power lives. Not in what someone else does or doesn't do, not in whether they reach out or stay silent, but in who you're becoming, in how you're showing up, in what you're allowing yourself to feel. And right now, you're allowing more, you're holding more, you're being more. And that creates a different energy, a different frequency, a different experience of connection, even across distance, even across silence, even across whatever happened that created the separation in the first place. You're not forgetting. You're not erasing. You're not pretending it didn't hurt or didn't matter. You're just not letting it define everything anymore. You're just not carrying it the same way. And when you stop carrying something the same way, it weighs less. It takes up less space. It creates less distance. Have you been feeling this shift, this lightness? Let me know. Here's the truth. The distance between you and anything, anyone, any experience, it's always an inside job. It's always about what you're holding, what you're believing, what you're allowing. And you've been holding a lot, you've been protecting yourself, you've been keeping yourself safe, and that was right. That was necessary. That was exactly what you needed. But now you're ready for something different. Not because time has passed, not because anything external has changed, but because you're ready to hold this differently, to feel this differently, to be with this differently. And that shift, that internal shift, that's what changes everything. That's what makes distance feel less absolute. That's what makes separation feel less permanent. That's what makes possibility feel real again. Not because of magic, not because of fate, not because the universe is orchestrating some grand reunion, but because you're becoming someone who can create space for something new, something different, something more aligned with who you are now. And who you are now, you're incredible. You're aware. You're present. You're willing to feel, willing to grow, willing to soften without losing yourself. That's rare. That's powerful. That's real. So I want you to take a breath. I want you to notice what's happening inside of you. I want you to acknowledge this shift, this opening, this awareness that the distance you've been holding, it doesn't have to be permanent. It doesn't have to define everything. It doesn't have to be the end of the story, because you get to decide. You get to choose. You get to create what comes next based on what feels true for you, what feels aligned, what feels like peace. And maybe that means letting the distance soften. Maybe that means allowing connection to feel possible again. Maybe that means holding this person, this situation, this love with new eyes, with a new heart, with a new awareness of who you are and what you're capable of holding. Or maybe it means something else entirely. Maybe it means honoring the distance. Maybe it means choosing yourself in a different way. Maybe it means recognizing that some separations are complete, and that's okay too. But whatever it means, it's yours to discover, yours to feel, yours to choose. And I trust you. I trust your awareness. I trust your growth. I trust that you know deep down what's true for you. So be here, be present, be with whatever is moving inside of you, and trust that you're exactly where you need to be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your openness. Thank you for trusting this space and trusting yourself. I don't sell futures, I build architects. No predictions, just the raw truth for the tough ones. Stay magic, stay in the now.